My name is Aria Montgomery. I'm 32 years old, and until a few weeks ago, I believed my life was stable in the way that mattered. Not perfect, but structured, predictable, earned. I work in commercial insurance, risk assessment, policy evaluation, long hours spent analyzing patterns most people ignore. My days follow a rhythm: early gym, office by 8, dinner at home. I track expenses, I plan ahead. I don't make emotional decisions without understanding the outcome. I've always trusted systems more than feelings. They're easier to verify. Ethan Carter is 30, my fiancé. He works in marketing for a regional healthcare group. Confident, social, the kind of man who can walk into a room and immediately belong there. He knows how to adjust his tone, his posture, his words, depending on who's watching. We had been together just over 3 years, living together for one. A 2-bedroom apartment close to both our offices, shared bills, shared spreadsheet, rent, utilities, groceries, all documented, balanced, predictable. Our wedding was scheduled for next month. Around 60 guests, mostly family, deposits paid, RSVPs coming in. From the outside, everything looked aligned. And until last week, I thought it was. Ethan had been in a serious relationship before me. It ended after a few years. Not dramatic, just over. He kept his ex-girlfriend's last name after the breakup. Early in our relationship, he explained it as a professional decision. His portfolio, his client base, his online presence, all built under that name. At the time, I accepted it because it felt temporary. We weren't engaged yet. There was no reason to challenge something that seemed transitional. I assumed when we got married, it would resolve itself. Last week, we were finalizing paperwork for the marriage license. Nothing emotional, just logistics. Forms, dates, legal details. And in the middle of that conversation, casually, like he was mentioning the weather, Ethan said he planned to keep his current last name after we got married. I paused. Not confrontational, just clarifying. I asked if it was still about paperwork, about timing, about administrative convenience. He didn't hesitate. He said no. He said his current last name carried more prestige than mine, that it sounded more established, that mine was harder to pronounce, that it didn't have the same weight professionally. He said it the way someone explains something obvious. Simple, logical, neutral. No apology. No awareness that what he was saying might land wrong. Just an evaluation. I remember looking at him for a few seconds, trying to match the tone of the conversation to the meaning of the words. And then I said, okay. He nodded, satisfied, and moved on. Started talking about seating arrangements, guest placements, whether his boss should be closer to the front or center. Like nothing significant had just happened. I didn't argue. I didn't defend my name. I didn't ask him to reconsider. Because in that moment, I wasn't confused. I understood exactly what he meant. That night, after he fell asleep, I stayed at the kitchen table. Lights off except for the one above the counter. Phone in my hand. Blank note open. And I started writing. Not feelings. Not questions. Logistics. Vendor contacts. Lease terms. Refund policies. Because the issue wasn't really the last name. It was the way he evaluated me, compared me, and felt comfortable ranking me lower out loud. The next morning, I went to work like normal. Didn't bring it up. Didn't revisit the conversation. Ethan was still asleep when I left for the gym. By the time I got back, he was already on a call, pacing the living room, talking about campaign metrics. From the outside, nothing had changed. But I work in risk assessment, and when someone shows you how they measure value, you believe them. Around noon, he texted me, asked about final suit fittings, whether my parents had confirmed their hotel. It read like any other wedding week message. I responded politely. No change in tone. No indication that anything was wrong. Because I wasn't interested in a dramatic scene. I wanted clarity. After work, I reviewed our lease agreement. Both names on it. 3 months left. Breaking it early required 60 days notice and a fee equal to 1 month's rent. Financially manageable. Then I checked vendor contracts. Venue deposit. Partially refundable if canceled within 2 weeks. We were still inside that window. Catering. Tiered refund based on timing and guest count. Photographer. Non-refundable deposit, but convertible to credit. I wasn't acting impulsively. I was gathering information. That evening, Ethan came home in a noticeably good mood. He had dinner with 2 friends, his groomsmen. He mentioned that one of them joked about him keeping his current last name because it sounded more powerful. Ethan laughed when he repeated it. Called it not entirely wrong. I watched him while he spoke, not looking for emotion, looking for consistency. I asked him directly, no sarcasm, if he believed my last name would negatively affect him professionally. He shrugged, said it just didn't have the same recognition, that he had worked hard to build credibility and wasn't willing to downgrade for tradition. Downgrade. Again. Same tone. Same calm delivery. Like it was just data. I didn't argue. Because this wasn't about pride. It was about partnership. And if he genuinely believed attaching himself to me publicly was a downgrade, that's not something you negotiate. That's something you acknowledge. That night, he fell asleep quickly. I stayed up again. But this time, I wasn't listing possibilities. I was outlining steps. Step 1, confirm what could be recovered financially. Step 2, figure out where I would go. Because for the first time since he proposed, I wasn't thinking about the wedding anymore. I was thinking about leaving. The next morning, nothing looked different. Ethan was making coffee in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone, half listening to a podcast about brand positioning. He handed me a mug like he always did. Same routine, same rhythm. Don't forget, he said. We need to finalize the seating chart tonight. I nodded. I'll handle it. He smiled, like everything was on track. And in a way, it was. Just not in the direction he thought. I didn't bring up the conversation about the last name again. There was nothing left to clarify. He had already explained his reasoning, twice. Both times it came down to the same thing. Hierarchy. His ex-girlfriend's name had weight. Mine didn't. So instead of revisiting it, I shifted into execution. That afternoon, during my lunch break, I stepped outside the office building and called the venue coordinator. I kept my voice neutral. Told her there had been a change in circumstances and asked what cancellation would look like financially if I withdrew this week. She didn't ask for details. Just pulled up the contract. We were still within the partial refund window. We would lose a portion of the deposit, but the majority would be returned within 30 days. It wasn't insignificant, but it wasn't catastrophic either. Next, I called the caterer. Similar structure, tiered refund. If I canceled before final headcount submission, we would only forfeit a small administrative fee. The photographer was less flexible. Deposit non-refundable, but convertible into a credit valid for 2 years. 2 years. That detail stayed with me. 2 years felt like a different lifetime. By the time I walked back into the office, I had numbers. Not estimates. Certainties. That evening, Ethan was sitting at the dining table with his laptop open, reviewing RSVP responses. He looked excited. He told me his manager had confirmed attendance. Said it would be a good opportunity to show up as a couple in front of senior leadership. That phrasing stood out. Show up. As a couple, but under a name that wasn't mine. I set my bag down and asked one more question. Carefully. After we're married, I said, how do you plan to introduce us at work events? He didn't hesitate. I'm Mr. and Mrs., obviously. With different last names? Of course. He said it confidently, like it was progressive, thoughtful. Then he added, almost casually, it'll be clear I chose to retain the stronger name. Stronger. That word settled into place like the final piece of something I had already been assembling. I didn't react. Not outwardly, but internally, the structure was complete. This wasn't about convenience. It wasn't about paperwork. It was about branding. And I wasn't part of the brand he valued. That night, after he went to bed, I transferred my portion of our shared savings into my personal account. It wasn't hidden money. Everything was documented in our spreadsheet. Clear contributions, clear ownership. I left his portion untouched. Then I drafted an email to the venue. Short, direct. I stated that due to a change in circumstances, the event would not proceed, and I was initiating cancellation under the terms of our agreement. No explanation, no emotion, just facts. I didn't send it yet. I reread it twice. Checked the contract again, then scheduled it to send the next morning. I slept better that night, not because I felt relief, but because the uncertainty was gone. Clarity is uncomfortable at first, then it becomes practical. The next morning, Ethan left early for a meeting. He kissed my cheek on the way out, said, "We're almost there." I smiled. "Yeah," I said, "almost." As soon as the door closed, I hit send. By noon, the venue had responded. Confirmation received. Cancellation processed. Refund timeline outlined. No complications. No resistance. Just procedure. I moved to the next step. Caterer. Photographer. Each message tailored to the contract. Each one clean, controlled, documented. By the end of the week, every vendor had acknowledged cancellation. Financially, the loss was manageable. We would lose some deposits, but most of the larger payments hadn't been made yet. I stopped those scheduled transfers immediately. Ethan had no idea. He was focused on fittings, guest confirmations, playlist revisions. One night, he asked me to follow up with my cousin about an RSVP. I told him I would handle it. I didn't, because there was nothing left to confirm. The apartment was next. We were both on the lease, but most of the furniture, was mine. Purchased before he moved in. Couch, dining table, bed frame, mattress, desk. I had receipts for everything. Digitally stored. I spent an hour pulling them into a single folder. Not because I expected a conflict, but because I planned for variables. Then I called the leasing office. Asked about transferring the lease to one tenant. They said it was possible, with income verification and a processing fee. I didn't give details, just gathered information. That weekend, Ethan hosted his groomsmen for brunch. I stayed out of it, left early for the gym, stayed longer than usual. When I came back, I paused outside the door. Voices inside, laughter, and then I heard him. It's a power move, he said. Honestly, more people should do it. Why downgrade just for tradition? Someone laughed. Another voice said something I couldn't catch. Ethan responded, exactly. It's not about ego. It's about positioning. Positioning. I stood there for a moment, hand still on the door, and something became very clear. He had already built a narrative, one where his decision was smart, strategic, empowered, and any discomfort I might have would be framed as insecurity, which meant if I challenged him publicly, I would lose, not the argument, the perception. So I didn't challenge him. I didn't engage. Instead, on Monday morning, I scheduled a viewing for a short-term furnished rental across town. Month-to-month lease. Available immediately. I toured it during my lunch break. Small. Clean. Neutral. No shared history. No emotional residue. Walking distance to my office. It wasn't better than our apartment, but it was separate. That mattered more. That afternoon, I submitted the application. Credit check. Income verification. Standard process. I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was closing accounts. The approval came through within 24 hours. I signed the lease electronically. Scheduled move-in for the day before the wedding. That date wasn't random. It was precise. I didn't want weeks of tension, confrontations, arguments. I wanted one clean break. Aligned with the reality he had already created. That week, while Ethan finalized appointments and coordinated schedules, I started packing quietly. Not obvious. No boxes in the living room. No disruption. Just small things. Off-season clothes. Old files. Items from the backs of closets. Things he wouldn't notice immediately. I also scheduled movers. 2-hour minimum. Early morning slot. Efficient. Controlled. Midweek, Ethan asked if I had updated the wedding website. He wanted it to reflect how we would be introduced. He suggested listing us with different last names, to normalize it for guests. I looked at him for a second, then asked, "Do you see any issue with our future children having my last name, while you keep your ex's?" He rolled his eyes. "We're not even pregnant yet," he said. "You're being dramatic." Then he added, "Kids can take whichever name makes the most sense for their opportunities." Opportunities. That word again. I nodded. Didn't argue. Because internally, that was the final confirmation I needed. This wasn't a miscommunication. It wasn't stress. It was consistent. Deliberate. A value system. And I don't negotiate with patterns. On Thursday, I went to the bank. Opened a new checking account, only in my name. Updated my direct deposit information with HR that afternoon. No shared financial threads left. That night, Ethan was unusually affectionate. He wrapped his arm around me on the couch. Talked about the future. Said people would admire how confident he was for keeping his name. I listened. Didn't correct him. Didn't challenge the assumption. Because I wasn't part of that future anymore. When he fell asleep, I sat in the living room, looked around. The couch I bought. The table I assembled. The space I built before he entered it. I didn't feel angry. I felt finished. The next morning, the movers were scheduled. 7 a.m. Ethan would be out. Final appointment. Brunch with his mother. Timing aligned. Everything was in place. All that was left was execution. The morning of the move, everything felt quiet. Not tense. Not emotional. Just precise. Ethan was getting ready in the bedroom, adjusting his shirt in the mirror, talking about the rehearsal dinner like it was just another item on a checklist. He kissed me on the cheek before leaving. "Don't forget to confirm the head count," he said. "I'll take care of it," I replied. I already had. He smiled, grabbed his keys, and left. The door clicked shut behind him. And just like that, the timeline shifted. The movers arrived exactly at 7 o'clock. 2 men, efficient, no small talk. I walked them through the apartment. Couch, dining table, bed frame, mattress, desk, kitchen equipment I had purchased. Everything was documented. Everything was mine. They worked quickly. Disassembled, wrapped, loaded. I supervised, but there was nothing to manage. I had already done the work. The emotional part had ended days ago. By 9:30, the apartment was almost empty. By 10:30, It didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a staging space. Neutral, temporary, hollow. I walked through each room once. Bedroom, closet, bathroom, kitchen, checking for anything I might have missed. There wasn't much left. Just the pieces that had always been his, and the things that didn't matter enough to take. On the kitchen counter, I placed a folder. Inside, copies of everything. Vendor cancellations, refund confirmations, lease information, and a letter. Short, direct, no emotion. I explained that I had canceled the wedding, secured the refunds within contractual limits, moved my belongings out. I noted that the leasing office confirmed he could assume the apartment if he qualified, that I would cover my portion of rent through the end of the current month. Nothing more. No accusations. No explanations about feelings. Just facts. Before I left, I took one last look around. Not for nostalgia, just confirmation. There was nothing left to reconsider. Then I walked out, closed the door behind me, and didn't look back. By noon, I was in the new rental, signing the final paperwork. Bare walls, minimal furniture, no shared history. It felt clean. At 12:15, I sent the email to the guest list. Short message. Due to unforeseen differences, the wedding would not be taking place. We appreciate your understanding. No details. No explanations. By 1 o'clock, I blocked Ethan's number. Not out of anger. Out of control. I didn't want the first wave of reaction to interrupt the process. I needed space for the plan to fully land. At 2 o'clock, I unblocked him. The phone started vibrating almost immediately. Missed calls. Texts. Voicemails stacking one after another. The first message read, "Where is everything?" The second, "Why is the bed gone?" The third was longer, less controlled. By the fourth call, I knew he had read the letter. I let the phone ring. Not to be dramatic, just timing. Shock needs to burn off before anything productive can happen. After about an hour, I answered. He didn't ask where I was. He didn't ask why. He started with, "What is this?" His tone was sharp, not confused, offended. "You canceled the wedding," he said. Without even talking to me, I let him finish. He kept going, said guests were texting him. His mother was confused, embarrassed. "What kind of woman does this?" he asked. I waited until he stopped. Then I said calmly, "We did talk about it." Silence. I continued. "I asked you about your name, about prestige, about what you called a downgrade." He exhaled sharply. "That's not what this is about," he said. "It is," I replied. I didn't raise my voice, didn't argue. I just stated it. I can't marry someone who believes being associated with me lowers their value. There was a pause. Then he shifted. "You're overreacting," he said. "It's just a name. People do this all the time." Then sharper, "If you were confident, this wouldn't bother you." That part was familiar. The narrative. I didn't engage with it. "And this isn't about confidence," I said. "It's about alignment." He went quiet. Just for a second. Then he tried again. "What, so you just walk away?" he said. 3 years? Gone over this? "It's not just this," I said. "It's what it represents." Another pause. Longer this time. Then his tone changed. Less sharp. More controlled. "Where are you?" he asked. "I've secured separate housing," I said. "I'm not giving the address." That irritated him. "I need to understand what you're doing," he said. "You already do," I replied. He shifted again, now practical. "What about the deposits?" he asked. "The money? The lease?" "I handled the refunds within contract terms," I said. "Documentation is in the folder." "And the apartment?" "I'll cover my portion through the end of the month. After that, it's yours if you qualify." He let out a breath. "You planned this," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. Silence. Then, "So you've just been pretending everything was fine?" "No," I said. "I was verifying my decision." That landed differently. I could hear it. The realization, the shift from anger to something else. "You didn't even give me a chance to explain," he said. "You already did," I replied. Twice." Another silence. Then, quieter, "Would you reconsider?" No." No hesitation. No emphasis. Just final. "Why?" he asked. And for the first time, his voice didn't sound defensive. It sounded uncertain. "Because once respect becomes negotiable," I said, "it doesn't come back the same." He didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was lower. "Aria," but I ended the call. Not abruptly, just intentionally. There was nothing left to clarify. That evening, the messages started again, but the tone had changed. Less anger. More explanation. He said he didn't mean my name was inferior. That I misunderstood. That he was talking about branding. Professional positioning. Not personal value. The problem was, he had been very clear the first time. And I don't rewrite clarity to make it more comfortable. Later that night, he called again. Calmer. Said we should meet. Talk like adults. Mentioned counseling. Time invested. History. I listened. Then said, I'm open to a conversation for closure. Pause. But not for negotiation. That distinction irritated him. You're being rigid, he said. Relationships require compromise. I asked one question. What compromise did you offer? Silence. Because keeping his ex-girlfriend's last name wasn't compromise. It was a decision, framed as empowerment. He didn't answer. Instead, he asked, Is there someone else? No, I said. There wasn't. This wasn't about another person. It was about the person I was about to marry, and the way he saw me. Later that night, he sent a photo. The living room, empty, bare walls, a suitcase near the door, no caption. I looked at it for a few seconds, then put my phone down. Didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. The next morning, my phone rang again. Different name. His mother. I let it go to voicemail. Not out of avoidance, just sequence. Some conversations don't belong at the beginning of something that has already ended. The message she left was calm, measured, disappointed but controlled. Arya, she said, weddings are stressful. People say things they don't mean. Pride shouldn't ruin something good. Pride. It's interesting how quickly self-respect gets renamed when it becomes inconvenient for other people. I didn't call her back. Not because I didn't respect her, but because this wasn't something that could be explained in a way that would feel acceptable to her. By the afternoon, Ethan texted again. Short this time. Please come home so we can fix this. I read it twice, then looked around my new place. Small kitchen, neutral walls, no shared objects, no overlapping identities. For the first time in weeks, there was no background tension, no subtle imbalance, just quiet. I typed back one sentence, there's nothing to fix. After that, things didn't stop. They just changed shape. The messages became smaller, more controlled. At first, practical. Mail forwarding, remaining refund checks. A few kitchen items I had left behind. I responded to those. Short answers. No commentary. No openings. Then slowly, the tone shifted. One night, around 11:40, he sent a longer message. Said he had been thinking about what I said. That maybe he had been insensitive. That maybe he had framed things poorly. He wrote that he never intended to rank me against his ex. That part stood out. Because I had never accused him of consciously ranking me. I said he revealed how he measures value. The fact that he defended against a comparison told me he understood it all along. He asked if we could postpone instead of cancel. Take time. Let emotions settle. Said people make mistakes under stress. I read the message in the morning, then replied, this isn't stress, it's clarity. That was the difference. Stress is messy, confusing. This had been precise from the moment he spoke. His next message was different, less structured, more honest. He admitted that after his last relationship ended, he felt unstable professionally. That keeping his ex-girlfriend's last name had felt like holding on to something solid, recognizable, safe. He said it had nothing to do with loving her. I believe that. But stability built on someone else's identity, then defended as superior to the person you're choosing next. That's not something you can build a future on. That weekend, he asked to meet. One last time. Public place. Coffee shop near the apartment. I agreed. Not to reconsider, just to finish the conversation properly. He looked tired when I walked in. Not dramatic. Just worn down. Like the version of him that had been so certain a week ago had quietly collapsed. We sat across from each other. No touching. No attempt to recreate anything. He didn't start with small talk. He said it immediately. I'll change my name. Fast. Like pulling something off before it hurt more. It doesn't matter, he added. We matter. I listened. Carefully. Because this was the moment most people would interpret as resolution. Compromise. Effort. But something about it felt off. Not wrong. Just late. The problem, I said slowly, is that now it sounds like a concession. He frowned. What does that mean? It means you're adjusting the outcome, I said, but not the belief. He leaned back, frustrated. But that is the point, Arya, he said. I'm willing to compromise. He kept using that word. Compromise. Like it could rewrite what had already been said. I shook my head slightly. If you had told me, I said, that the name represented stability after a difficult breakup, we could have worked through that. If you had said you were afraid of losing professional continuity, we could have planned a transition. I paused. But you didn't say that. He didn't interrupt, because he knew. You said her name had more prestige, I continued. That mine was harder to pronounce, that keeping hers was a power move. I held his gaze. You framed my discomfort as ego, Silence. Not defensive this time. Just quiet. Those weren't slips. They were statements. And once someone shows you how they see you, you don't unsee it. So that's it? He asked. His voice wasn't sharp anymore. Just tired. Yes. Not angry. Not cold. Just certain. Not because I want to punish you, I added, but because this isn't something that fixes itself. He looked down at his coffee, then back at me. I can change, he said. I know, I replied, and I meant that. People can adjust behavior, modify decisions, reframe actions. But belief? That's slower, deeper. And I'm not interested in being the person someone practices that on. Will you ever reconsider? He asked. I shook my head. I don't revisit decisions once I've verified them. That part of me, he had always known. We finished our coffee. No raised voices. No dramatic ending. Just completion. 2 months have passed since then. He's reached out a few times. Apologies. Memories. Fragments of what we were. I've responded politely, but briefly. No reopening. The refunds have all been processed. The lease has been transferred fully to him. My life is structured again. Not perfect, but aligned. I don't hate him. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he values status more than he realized. And I value being respected without having to negotiate for it. That difference. It looked small on paper, but it was big enough to walk away